Hey everybody, so it's Palmer and I'm back for the Inquisitorial Thoughts Q&A episode 3. Just a couple of quick things before I get started with the questions. For those of you, in the first couple of videos, or at least the first video, I had mentioned that you could write me by email at the one that I posted. That doesn't seem to be popular. Like, I've gotten lots of questions from on the comments below, but because I'm not getting them by email, like I'm not actually checking them anymore, so I'm not putting them up on. I don't really use that email. I'd mentioned I was just going to use it for this, but I don't really use that email that much, and so I'm not going to regularly check it for this questions for this because it doesn't seem to be used. And so I'm just going to continue on with the comments. That seems to be the preferred method for people that are asking questions. I appreciate the questions. Please keep them coming. It's lots of fun for me. I'm sitting here at the end of the day, just finished some hobby time, and I am having not some scotch tonight, but a Flying Monkeys Craft Brewery Smash Bomb Atomic IPA, and that is out of Barrie, Ontario, Canada. I've had this one before. I quite like it. It's really hoppy, and really gets to the back of your throat there with the bitter, or I think it's the back of the throat, but yeah, not bad. And so I am just going to go in order, and here we go. Cruoangelicilicis. Everybody has to comment on how well they can say that name. I think there needs to be a contest. I hope I did that okay. Great Q&A. What are your ultimate hobby goals? That's a really good question. It's pretty straightforward, I guess, but I'm going to answer that two ways. I guess my main hobby goal, and this sounds kind of like Mr. Obvious, but my main hobby goal is really just to have fun. And what I mean by that is the whole miniature hobby, like whether it be tabletop gaming with friends or just getting like a miniature and painting it and all that kind of stuff. For me, it's the closest thing as an adult to that feeling of seeing gifts under the Christmas tree, or just like really feeling like a kid again. And I've heard other people say this recently on their channels too, make reference to that, but I like that. I actually like kind of that feeling, that just really good feeling, and just that you get from being in the hobby that you like. And whether like, as much as I still feel I need to improve in my painting, and there's lots of things I can improve upon, and I should have goals, like actual legitimate goals. To me, it's just about having fun and doing what I want to do at that moment, and just enjoying it. And so I didn't always feel that way, like transparency. There were times when it was like, oh, I got to get these done, and I got to get this, and I got to do this, and it was almost like, I wouldn't say stressful, but like there was like a feeling of urgency, But now it's just about having fun. But having said that, there is something like an actual goal that I really feel I need to do, and because so many things just get in the way. Like, I always have stuff I want to paint. I have other things besides the hobby that I do, and family and stuff, and there never seems to be enough time. And one thing that I said, many of you might remember last fall, I had mentioned that I wanted to do some actual sculpting, like scratch sculpting, and I've never given myself the time to do it. There's probably multiple reasons for that. Some of it is time, like actual time. Some of it is competing time, like always having some stuff to paint sitting here that I'm always like thinking two things out of what I'm painting. And that just gets in the way of spending dedicated time on anything else in the hobby sometimes. And then 3 is just because the scratch sculpting is new to me. I'm the type of person, and this is often in my personality, and it has been with other things, is that taking the first couple of steps is oftentimes the hardest for me. And it's just getting started, like realizing there's a long journey on something, and just getting started is oftentimes the hardest. And that's what's actually kept me back with those other things I mentioned on doing the sculpting. And so what I've decided is that with the next New Year's painting challenge, which I'm getting ready to do as I finish, I'm just pretty much done now with my levies for my saga. When I do the Imperial Night for Nick's New Year's painting challenge, and I start the build really soon, I'm going to be scratch sculpting the throne and the pilot inside it. And so I was thinking about just doing the throne and buying the Forge World Knight Scion, but I'm instead going to just completely sculpt it from scratch. And I'm going to take some time to do it. I will be painting some Marvel characters like here and there while I'm doing that project, but I'm going to just focus on that project, and I'm not really going to think about any other stuff that I have to paint for a little bit. I'm going to give myself, even if I'm just going to give myself the time over a month or two. I probably won't need that long, but I'm giving myself the time to not think about anything else as far as like painting or whatever in the hobby, and putting that as a priority, so I can start and do my first scratch built mini with the idea that then I can do others, and I'll have kind of taken those first steps and broken the seal. So that's a long answer. That's my hobby goal. My hobby goal is always just to have fun, but it's a two-part answer because I do actually have an actual goal too, and that is to actually work on sculpting and make it a priority in my time, because I just haven't done it, and I'm disappointed about it that I haven't. So, because I actually enjoy it, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of even just doing the conversions and the face like that I did. And I've done some different things. So those of you who know that I've done that, like the guy with the top hat, I did his cape and some bits on him and his hat and stuff. And like I did the face when I had the warlord guy whose face was all ripped up. I kind of resculpted his face a bit. And recently I did some little things on hair and stuff, like more like little conversions and sculpting bits. But I want to do one from scratch. So yeah. So that is that answer. Thank you for the question. Idic Beer, another great Q&A. Billiards is played on a snooker table. Well, actually, it is the other way around. Snooker is played on a billiards table, which is 6 by 12 feet in size, so way bigger than a pool table. That's referring to the question from last time. Question for this time: what is your favorite chocolate bar? Well, I'm going to say, it's going to be a little quick, but I'm going to say Snickers. For a long time, I actually liked a Snickers chocolate bar, and I find, I remember, maybe somebody remembers this too, but I remember from like the 70s or the 80s, there was like that commercial where the Snickers really satisfies you, and there'd be like this like construction worker like sitting there eating it for lunch, you know. I never forgot that. But growing up, like I did find, like even when I shouldn't have been eating candy bars for a snack at work, but like there was a time when I worked in the hospital overnight, and like I would be like, you know, when I was hungry, I'd go down to the candy machine and get myself a Snickers, and I just find that it's like pretty substantial, and I like them. So yeah, there's lots of others too, don't get me wrong. There's some that you can't even get anymore that I like, but Snickers, that's the answer. Alright, so Smitty left, Smitty is the next question, and he left this on another video. Like, it's when I first started, and it was just sort of some confusion. I think it was on a different video than the one, but I wanted to capture that and include it for this one. Nice job on the conversion. I think conversions, and he's talking about my saga levies, I believe. I think it adds a lot more variety. Question for your next video: do you like doing conversions, and how comfortable are you doing them? This is kind of like coincidental considering the last question, but I really enjoy doing conversions. I think how comfortable I am really just depends on the conversion, you know, because there's lots of things I haven't done. I've done some things when I first started out. I remember doing little bits on an Eldar jet bike to be underneath where the gun is, because I was magnetizing guns, and I was trying to create, I had bits that were missing, and I was trying to do them myself, and I was new at doing them, just working with the green stuff and not really feeling that comfortable. And you know, like I wasn't, it passed for me, but it wasn't the greatest, you know, compared to the bits that came, because the Eldar stuff is really, you know, not lots of nice curves. It's hard to emulate it if you don't really feel comfortable. And so I would say, like, when I just did the conversions with the levies, I felt pretty comfortable with that, and I enjoyed it. But then I have done stuff too where I haven't, you know, and it just because it was the first time I did it, and it was something that was difficult, and you know, it just depends. So, but I love it. I find that it's a really enjoyable part of the hobby is to create from like nothing. You know what I mean? Which is essentially what you're doing with a well, you're starting on something with a conversion, but when you sculpt, you know, that's the beginning point. And so just that creation of just something from just putty is really cool. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Even if it's not as good as somebody else's, it just feels like it's my own, and I really like that. Like even if it's not as good as like from a professional, you know. So, all right, Raleigh's Lair, excellent Q&A. He talks about how he loves the Vikings as well because it's like my favorite show. Have you seen the Shannara Chronicles yet? Your thought if you have. I actually kind of looked into this because I didn't really know what it was, and with the cable service I have in Canada, even though we do have MTV, I couldn't see it, like even on my TV guide there, and I kind of did some brief looking into that, and honestly I don't know where I could watch it in Canada, like on my cable network, because we do have MTV, and I believe it is, in some countries it's on MTV, but I just don't have access to it, so I haven't, so I don't really know a whole lot about it on that one. You've lived in a few cities. What are the best and worst places? That's tough because I know I'm going to insult some people or you know whatever. But I don't know if I could just say like one was the worst. But there were definitely certain things that were the worst about some, and the best about some. We'll go with the worst thing I've experienced, like living in a city. And as much as I love going to university and living for a number of years in the Buffalo, New York area, because I did live there, the lake effects, and people immediately think snow, like, oh, like snow is coming. It's not the snow. Like, we did have one time where they actually called a national emergency because we got 4 feet of snow in 4 hours, and that's just like ridiculous. It actually happened. But believe it or not, the thing that made it really bad there was the freezing rain. Like every day I would get up for school, like to go to college classes, and I'd be hit in the face with ice cold rain coming out of the door, and I hated that. That was what kind of made me miserable with the weather there. It wasn't the snow. And it wasn't the cold, because I live in Calgary now, and it's colder here, but it's a powdery snow, and we also get a thing called Chinooks that a lot of people don't know what these are, but Leonardo DiCaprio, when he was doing the Revenant filming here, he thought it was global warming, but really we get these warm winds that come off the mountains, and they're basically called Chinook winds. It's a weather pattern, and so after every 2 weeks, like or so, when we have snow, the snow kind of gets melted away with these warm winds. And when Leonardo DiCaprio, he became a bit of a laughingstock, you know, in the local area because he started screaming like global warming when he was here. And everybody's like, no, let's explain to you what this is. Like, yeah, stop talking to the paper. And so that's the long answer for the thing that I didn't like. Best place or what I did like, I'm just going to, you know, I really like living in Calgary where I'm at, so it's not as if I'm going to say this place because I like it better. Like, we actually moved from North Carolina to Calgary. I love North Carolina. There was a lot of things I loved about it, and I loved being like in between the mountains and the coast. So I was basically a few hours in outside Raleigh area, and I was a few hours from the mountains where I have family out there, and then the coast. And the seafood was just great. Like, you could get like so many good things from like a tourist place like perspective. It was just a beautiful area of the world, and I do go back to North Carolina quite a bit to visit family. And so yeah, like those are the two places and the two things. Having said that, I love being in Calgary. I really do. So, all right, and last question from Grawley is, have you ever painted any Reaper minis, seeing as you like D&D? Funny enough, I haven't. I've never actually painted a Reaper mini, and I like D&D. I mean, like and as I mentioned in that previous video, I have some like both the miniature board game minis that I painted to be part of the board game, but then I bought some collector's series ones, and I probably will continue to do both, paint the board game minis and the collector's series minis. Maybe I will paint up some bone miniatures. I know a lot of folks that I watch their channels do, and they look like cool miniatures, lots of variety. So yeah, good question. Robert Chisholm, I'm not sure if this was meant to be a question for the video, but it was a comment that kind of was like a question, so I'm just going to include it. And the question was, I was talking about Sharp's practice, and he'd asked, he'd said, on the new Sharp practice coming out soon, did you see the Lard Island News blog post on getting ready for the game? It had an outline of what a typical starting force for the game would look like. And he mentions it's 5 groups of line troops, 8 figures each, and a group of 6 skirmishers. I'm assuming you'd also need 2 to 3 officers or NCO minis too. The 2 Fat Lardy rules are always about the role of leaders and officers in battle. I didn't actually see it, the actual thing you're talking about, the Lard Island News. I did notice some posts on Facebook and things about how they were working on the second set of rules for it, and they were including the American War of Independence and like some of the other periods with it. I did watch the videos on Sharp's practice in the past, and I thought it was pretty cool. And I thought it was definitely a rule set that I'd be interested in looking at. I don't know if it was just the mood I was in the particular day, but I have like the rules for the original on PDF, and they just look kind of complicated for me. Like when I was first looking at it, I wasn't sure if it was, I may be getting confused with another rule set, but it looked like there were some areas that were fairly detailed, and you know, I just was looking at it at the time, and I wasn't sure at the time that I wanted to pick it up at that moment, because just given the, I'm not sure if it was to do with the leaders or wound allocation. I knew there was a lot in building the leader model, which that can be cool. Like I mentioned with the Musket and Tomahawks, I like when you can create some personality, you know, for the leader model, the officers. But I have to take a look at it again, and you know, it's either going to be most likely the second version of that I'll be looking at to continue doing some more French Indian War stuff in addition to Musket and Tomahawks, or I'll be looking at the second version of Musket and Tomahawks whenever that comes out, and that could be a long time. I think they maybe even, like I mentioned, call it Shackles and Bayonets, so we'll see. Yeah, no, it looks good though, for sure. There was also actually some interesting mechanics that I'd never seen before with cards and stuff. I know it's based on cards, but it was some really unique names and things, and at the time I just kind of skimmed through it, and I just didn't go too far into it when looking at it. Jankmaster. Good stuff. I've never been out of that way for a game, but saw the Flames in LA for a playoff game during Gretzky's first season with the Kings. I am from the East Coast myself, but I was really into hockey at that point. So, another quick hockey question before asking gaming hobby stuff. Bossy, Trottier, or Potvin? And while I think about that, I'm just going to take a sip. I don't really need to think about it, I just wanted to take a sip. Because I know that answer. Like, it goes without saying, like, all of those players are awesome players. And for those of you that either don't watch hockey or don't know the team, this is referring to, you know, the golden age of the Islanders in the early 80s, you know, before Edmonton went on their run to win the Stanley Cups. Some people, it overshadowed the fact that the Islanders won 4 Stanley Cups in a row prior to that. It is bossy, and it's not for a technical reason, like from a stats perspective, or he's the best player, or whatever it is. It's just that when I was a little kid, my grandparents always watched the Islanders, and, you know, I watched it with them. There was just something about Bossy, like, he was just amazing, and even when I didn't know, like, a lot technically about hockey, but I kind of, when I was really young and I just watched it, like, they could be losing, and you could count on Bossy in the last minutes to tie it and win it. Like, he would come out of nowhere, and he was like Superman for, like, when I watched hockey as a kid. Like, I remember, I'm not saying he made this move up, but he was really known for that sneak move going around the back of the goal and just flipping it in the other side and just being really tricky, you know, and he was a really, really high-scoring player, like amazingly high-scoring player. But he also was kind of a gentleman as a player too. Like, you know, he was one of those great players that was about winning and scoring, but like wasn't really a fighter. And he was just amazing. And so, without a doubt, it would be Bossy. There would be no comparison for me. Like, it's just, and that's not to downplay the other guys, and it's not even comparing. It's just because of who he was when I watched it at the time. All right, great question. It brings back a lot of memories too. Ralph Astley. Okay, nice Q&A. I noticed someone has disliked it already. and can't understand why. So my question, if it doesn't put you on the spot too much, is how do you feel about the thumbs down button on YouTube? That's a big question. Oh gosh, I saw this come through, Ralph, and I don't have no problem with answering. In some ways, it's probably good that you brought it up. I'm going to answer that from two different perspectives. And there's a lot of ways I can answer this because I have a lot of thoughts on it. But to be quite honest, talking about dislikes really, in a lot of ways, just feeds into the negativity around what sometimes, a lot of times, like people disliking what that achieves. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it's really easy for me to get negative, like, and not down negative, like crying, but just sort of like, you know, and it's not worth it at all. But I'll talk about that. But first, before I talk about what I think about dislikes from the perspective of this community that I'm a part of, the wargaming YouTube niche community, I'm going to just talk a little bit about it for a second in the greater scheme of things of like all of YouTube. And what I would say is this, is that first, Ralph, you wrote some great things, and if any of you guys just take a look at the last Inquisitorial thoughts at what Ralph's thoughts are on this, because I agree with him. But in the grand scheme of things, as long as you're going to have a thumbs up, sometimes in the greater scheme of things on YouTube, I think it's good to have a thumbs down. And the reason I say is this. There are some times when I've watched videos that have nothing to do with wargaming, that are really larger subject matter that appeal to more people. I've seen people put things on YouTube that marginalize others or alienate people or are really inconsiderate. And I can't even think of an example, but something just completely ridiculous. And sometimes, like if you're going to have a thumbs up available, it's good to actually see that there are people that don't agree with that opinion. Like sometimes I feel justified when somebody puts something out there that's just really, you know, out in a public space and shouldn't be, or is just, you know, really inconsiderate and just, you know, not, just something I really don't agree with at sort of a very ethical level. I'll admit it's a bit sort of personally gratifying to see that it's not agreed upon by the public. You know, that it, you know, that when, rather than just seeing that people only like it. Now, having said that, my understanding, I'm not an expert on YouTube, but my understanding is that dislikes work just like likes to promote a video on YouTube. And so people that dislike, I'm not sure if they realize it, but as I understand it, you're basically promoting the video when you dislike it. And so if you really dislike something, just don't do anything to it, you know, for the most part, if you don't really want to promote it. I'll give you an example. I was looking into a game recently, a miniature war game, and it took me to a video game channel because somebody happened to be at Comic-Con where they were promoting a miniature war game, and they just said, hey, look at this. But then they actually described like tabletop wargamers in a really like poor way, like, and they just generalized them all into a group of people of being anti-socialites and going on to other things. It was just really negative about like the community that I consider myself a part of. And so I didn't actually dislike it, but I noticed that I wanted to in some ways, but I noticed like that there were a whole bunch of people that sort of hit the dislike button, and lots of people that hit the like too. But I just realized that if I hit the dislike button, I'm just promoting it further, so I just got out of there. I really just wanted to see the game. So I guess I'm a little double-minded on it from the greater perspective. Like, maybe if you're going to have likes, there is a place for dislikes. And I don't hear too many like wargamers say that, like in our niche community, because typically, let's change gears, what we have in our community is a really niche community. And typically with a lot of our stuff, like, you know, we have a lower amount of people watching it. And for vlogs, like where it's just somebody doing their stuff, not claiming to be professional, sharing, you know, just trying to help out and really just enjoying the community with others. When you have folks that kind of come in and dislike, I agree with what you said, Ralph, that it really doesn't provide any input and things like that. But for the most part, when somebody is really not like trying to claim to be a professional and really just doing this just to show you what they're doing and just the camaraderie, the dislikes are sort of spiteful, and it's just, in my mind, it just comes from the negativity in the person that does it. And the nice thing is it's meaningless. Like, really, there are so many more likes in our community than dislikes. Like, they're drowned out for the most part, and they mean absolutely nothing, and they actually promote the video, if anything. And if you actually look around, like, really, really successful channels, like Templar's Crusade, gets constant dislikes, small numbers, really small numbers compared to the vast amounts of likes. But you have, like, trolls that just come through and they just have to do it each time. And so Matt at Mini Wargaming has said that, like, if you end up becoming successful with a YouTube channel, or if you want to be, expect the dislikes and expect negative comments, because the internet is just a pool of negativity. And so you're not going to get away from that. Like, you have to accept that. That's just, like, human nature. It's just in there. One thing that I will mention is this, is that for the folks that are not subscribers that come in and dislike, it's completely meaningless. Like, they don't even oftentimes even know why they're there. Like, they were searching for something, they end up in your channel. It's not what they ended up thinking that they were going to get into to watch, and they just hit the thumbs down. And it doesn't matter. They never come back, and it's just meaningless. And your subscribers hit all the thumbs up, and it's just lopsided anyway. The one thing, there is a phenomenon. I hear a lot of people say, well, my subscribers never ever, like, dislike my channel. Well, it will happen, actually. If you actually, as your channel continues to grow, like, I guarantee you, it's just a matter of time that you're going to get somebody that it takes nothing to hit the subscriber button. Like, you're going to get somebody on your channel that you're going to probably, if you knew, like, really knew, you'd probably wish that they didn't hit that button. But, really, like, if you, I'm just about, I don't have a ton of subscribers, but I'm, like, hitting 800 subscribers. So I can guarantee you, out of the 800 people that subscribe to my channel, there are people there that I wouldn't like if I met them in real life. Like, I can guarantee you that. And that's nothing against you guys that subscribe, but it's like, I have no control of who hits the subscriber button. There are a lot of people I talk to on a regular basis that I enjoy, and many of them will actually sometimes give me a piece of critical advice, positive critique, maybe disagree with me about something, and we'll actually chat about it, and it's fine. It's like, that's what it's about. Like, we converse, we don't agree on everything, but like, that's all it is, and we go on, and then we talk about other things, and we do agree on things at times, and that's just the way it is. But there are going to be people that are going to subscribe to your channel, if you have a channel, that are going to dislike your video at one point, and they may not even unsubscribe, which is the really abnormal thing, like, from a human behavior perspective. Like, for somebody to subscribe to your channel and say they kind of want to see your videos, but to then dislike your video and not leave, and also not comment, but then come back and potentially dislike again, is really abnormal in my mind. And I would wish anybody that does that, just leave. Like, and I'll actually, I don't need subscribers. Like, I don't charge anything for this. This is all about fun. And so really, people like that are not wanted. Like, I don't really care whether they're, subscribers of the channel or not. And I find it really abnormal, and, really the problem is with them. Like, that's just, and I do, like, I have one or two people that are subscribers that do, like, you can tell on YouTube Analytics, which I look at my channel under the analytics, and you can see that there are a couple of one or two subscribers that actually do dislike the video and they don't unsubscribe. And that's just weird, and it's like, dudes, dudettes, just take off. Like, nobody really cares. And so, go watch something you want to watch. So I'll refund you exactly what you paid. And so, so here comes the negativity. It's starting to boil up, like when you're cooking spaghetti, like the actual foam is starting to come up because I'm talking about negative things. That's my thoughts, Ralph. It doesn't really matter to me. There probably is a place at some level. I really like the fact that our community is so good that the thumbs ups are so much more prevalent than the thumbs down, and really, the thumbs down are meaningless, and whether it be a subscriber or not. So yeah. So what's next? Mini Warzone. You mentioned role-playing games and how you paint stuff for nostalgia. Was D&D the game that got you started in role-playing? And would you ever go back to something like that if you had the right group of people? Absolutely, D&D was the game that got me started into it. D&D was the core, basic set, the red box, early 80s. Then I went into, and I got the expert companion, like master, I believe, the Black Book rules. I had all that stuff, and then I got into AD&D, which was just great. I loved it. I didn't do much D&D after that. Like, I think I might have had a brief stint with 2nd or 3rd edition, never really bought all the books, but I think I may have tried it and just didn't continue. But it was really primarily a thing from elementary through the beginning of high school, and that was mainly my career, like in D&D. I also played Star Frontiers, also TSR. It was like a space sort of based game. I also played the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, Heroes Unlimited. There were a number of other ones that I've tried, and also, like, I wish I had this, but one of my friends had the Marvel Universe, the Marvel game, where you could create your own kind of characters in the Marvel Universe or use the Marvel characters. So I love that stuff. Would you ever go back to something like that if you had the right group of people? Okay, so it would be easy for me to just quickly say no, only because it would be wrong for me to say I don't have time for that, because I do have time for other things. It's just a matter of what you prioritize. I do have the time for it if I just didn't do other things and chose that over it. And I would say that, like, my tabletop wargaming and my other hobby stuff, like just the painting and doing all the stuff I want to do for it, really, for the most part, feels like it would be in the way of that. And so even if I had the right group of people, I likely would be just, still doing tabletop gaming instead. But I have been watching your videos, Pete, and my daughter did see... I have this right here, I'll show it to you guys. I'm sure you've seen it, but I showed this to my daughter the other day. This is actually not the original, but a number of years ago I picked up the... It just looks like the original red box from the original when I was a kid. It's the same exact drawing. This is what this box, like the outside, is what started it for me. But this is actually 4th edition. It's not the original or 5th edition, which is what they're currently on. My daughter's 12 and she loves the fantasy genre. She kind of likes Magic, like, to a degree, like, but she loves the fantasy genre. We both love Skyrim. We both love the Elder Scrolls. I should say, she loves Skyrim. She's never played the earlier ones, but I've played back, like, the Elder Scrolls, so various versions of it, iterations. She's asked me whether I would consider playing a bit of D&D with her. And so, for those of you that have watched the channel, I've attempted to do some things like this with her, with Warhammer Fantasy and stuff, and basically the wood elves that I'd gotten her and the goblins that I got, and that the miniature painting didn't really pan out for her, and, like, I'm not really into painting like a whole army for somebody else, even if it's my daughter. Like, you guys might be shocked about that, but, like, if she wants to play tabletop gaming, she's gonna have to, like, want to paint. Like, I feel that way about it. I guess you don't have to. Like, I realize you can buy your own army and not paint, and you can be that kind of player in tabletop gaming, but for whatever reason, because that's the way I am, like, I just didn't really feel like fostering me painting up armies so she can try something out. Like, I wanted her to attempt it, and she didn't. So, because she didn't express the patience for that, we didn't continue. I think that I'm going to get the base... I'm going to probably get the basic set just like I have here, and for the 5th edition that you have, Pete. And I think we're going to try that and see where that goes. And then I think I'll pick up the Player's Handbook for the actual 5th edition if that ends up being the case. Because I think we're both, like, she's really into character creation, and I can't see her wanting to do pre-generated characters for too long, but we're going to try it. We're just going to see whether she likes that. And this is sort of weird, but like I think I'm gonna do initially the first time what they call theater of the mind, where you're not playing with miniatures. So it's like the way I played as a kid, which it's all in your imagination. Maybe some placeholders on like a map that you draw or whatever, but no miniatures. And you may, not you alone, Pete, but people may in the channel feel that that's sort of surprising, because like my whole channel is based on the miniatures and miniature painting and miniature wargaming, and I that's what I really enjoy. But because I played D&D as a kid, like completely from like in my imagination, and because I have so much stuff to paint for tabletop games, and that's not changing, the idea of initially approaching it, even though I have a lot of minis for D&D already, even the idea of initially approaching the game where I'm going to do it miniature based, and having a host of miniatures for the game, so like the monster manual, you know, like all of the miniatures that you could conceivably need for D&D, that's not appealing for me right away when testing the waters. And so the nostalgia piece of just doing it as I did in a kid, theater of the mind, like, and then also the practical piece of us just kind of getting into it for the first time, and also the fact that I have a lot of the stuff I want to do from like my painting projects, it all kind of makes me think I'm going to do it that way without miniatures to start. And then we'll go from there. I mean, maybe that'll change. I do have a lot of D&D minis between both the Wrath of Ashardalon and some pre-painted stuff that I had for Dungeon Command, which is made by Wizards of the Coast. It's 28mm as well. And then just some of the Collector's Series things. I could potentially do it. So there we go. I may be getting sucked in. Okay, next question. Richard from Tattoo for You. I think that's the smoothest I've said that now, so I'm getting, like, now, you know, I'm getting good at that. So, well, Richard says, good answers. I agree it's hard to try and explain what we do to others. I haven't gotten into historical gaming yet. I've thought about Bolt Action, Flames of War, but I like the creation aspect of sci-fi. I really enjoy history, and I love the stories of the Revolutionary War and World War II, but it tends to be hard for me to have the desire to sit down and play, say, the Battle of the Bulge when I know the outcome. Whereas sci-fi games, you make them what you want. Guess my question is, what is the best way for me to get into historicals, and any tips on which would be good for a beginner? Hope this makes some sense. Yeah, it makes complete sense. I typically am like you, even with historical games, in that I really prefer playing the historical game more as this was a battle during that war that's not necessarily documented. This was and oftentimes since I play skirmish games, it was just a skirmish that, like, yeah, like, it wasn't even labeled a battle, you know, and so it's fun because it's just sort of, it can be whatever you want, and that's why I actually play more historical skirmish games, and it really lends towards that. It's still like whatever you want. We still try to put it in the overall umbrella of context of what's going on. Now, I do have friends that are quite excited about playing like actual battles and theater books and stuff, and I think that's cool, and I'm kind of going to go along and do some of those too. But mainly, I actually play as you describe. More like it's just like a game of 40K, except it's in history, and it's in the sense that you don't know the outcome, and it's a skirmish, and it's not like this doesn't have to happen. Like, it could be anything. Now, which one should you get into? What's the easiest way? Tips, you know, which ones are good for a beginner? Well, that's a hard question. The easy part is you should play what you find most inspiring. So just for example, since you mentioned Revolutionary War and World War II, if those two are your favorite, definitely pick one of those two. Because there are so many good games out there, historical games for every era, that you really should do the one that inspires you the most. Now, I can plug Bolt Action and say that if you're interested in doing World War II, because the way the writer Alessio had written the rules, I do think that it's a really easy transition for 40K players to go right into Bolt Action. Bolt Action is actually, in my mind, a little bit simpler than 40K in its mechanics, but it has some really unique mechanics, randomized actions and the orders dice and things that make it really fun. And I would say that it's just because World War II is still, you have mechanized vehicles and, you know, like tanks and things like you would have in 40K, and you have bullets and machine guns and all that kind of stuff and aircraft. Like it kind of is a similar transition in some ways. It's just that it's historical now. If you're really into Revolutionary War, then go with that period. Like, you know, go with what makes you most excited to paint the stuff up and to really be in that genre. Like, picture yourself in that genre, you know. That's my first answer. Then as far as what's easy, first of all, I think if you're interested in skirmish, so like smaller engagements and not like big battles that have, let's say, Napoleonics, like large amounts of line troops and just lots of investment and time in painting, and also like rule mechanics that are more about like formations and large battles. If you're interested in the skirmish, more like 40K, then go with that. Like, that'll be an easier transition for a beginner. But you could also take the opposite approach and say, well, I'm doing that in 40K, and I really would like to like field some of the big battles, like maybe even Ancients, you know, where you have huge mass battles and line formations and, you know, whatever. Maybe it'd be easier for you to do something completely different because you're feeling like you're getting something completely different out of it, and that's a positive. So do you see what I mean? Like you could either say it's easier because one's the same, or you could say it's easier because it's so different. Like, I feel like I'm doing something different, which is fun. You know, like I don't want to do the same thing. And so that's the hard question for, like, I think you need to look at it from that perspective. Like, what do you want to do from a gameplay perspective? Do you want to try something very different? Then, hey everybody, sorry, I ran out of video space on my card, so I guess this is turning into a long session, or I haven't deleted like old videos out well enough. So yeah, I guess just to continue what I was saying, is just, it depends on whether you feel that those, which one of those kind of sides you want, you know. So I would pick, like, I can, you know, I don't know all of the games out there, Richard, but I definitely like I like Musket and Tomahawks, I like Bolt Action, and I like Saga. All of those are skirmish games. All of those have fairly manageable rule sets. They're fun, fast playing, and if that's the kind of you know, thing you're into, then just pick, you know, the era that you like, and pick the kind of rule set you want. Like, how rigorous do you want the rules to be what you would consider to be realistic? How fast do you want them, you know, like to be able to, or, you know, conversely, not like worry about every little thing, but kind of be able to move the game along. Like, those are the kind of things you want to look at, I think. So, all right, last question, Tristan or Athelith. What is your favorite brush to paint with? Well, I think probably my favorite brush is probably just the brush that I end up using the most, because I use like all the different brushes, like dry brushing and standard brushes and detail brushes and like things like that. Because I mainly paint 28mm, and you know, I'm not like, I even use an airbrush if it's like larger things, in particular like vehicles. Like, I tend to use a detail brush more so than anything else. I've learned over the years that even with a standard brush with a good point, you can do quite a lot with it, even detail. And like, if you maintain the point on your brush, you can do quite a bit. I'm not always successful with that. I mean, when I paint a lot, I do go through my brushes, despite all the things I've learned and, you know, how you're meant to keep them. So I'll just show, like, I have two that I have liked over the years. One of them is no longer available, but I have an old one here. But, you know, like the old yellow tip from Games Workshop, which was called the Fine Detail Brush. For many years, I quite liked using that one on primarily. You know, like, I would do a lot of my larger blocking with the standard brush, but then I would work quite a bit with the Fine Detail Brush. Now, this one in particular you can't get anymore because the Citadel's changed their system. So they have all these other kinds, and I've tried them, and I think it's the, trying to remember, I think the one that, the layering brushes are quite nice, you know, from Citadel, and I have like right here a medium layer brush. But what I've gotten recently, which has a very similar feel for me, is to the Fine Detail Brush from Citadel, is the Privateer Press brush, and it's, they call it the Fine Studio Brush, 93088, and it's, you can't really see here, I guess, but it is a bit of a detail brush. It's called the Fine Studio Brush, PIP 93088, and I quite like that one, and I use that quite a bit. I've owned Winsor & Newton. I got this one early on in my painting. Everybody ranted and raved about it so much that I spend a huge amount of money on one. And this thing's really not in good shape anymore. I've used it over the years. It's a 000. I don't know that I'll ever really spend a lot of money on really, really expensive brushes again. Maybe I will get another one of those one day, but I find I can get by with a standard brush and a fine detail brush for most of my painting, and I don't usually need too much more than that, to be honest. Alright, well, I'd like to think that I ended on a positive note today. But thanks everybody for your questions. Please submit more questions for the next month below and as a comment in this video. And take care, everybody.